this is typically the sales funnel for a webinar. There's a registration page. After they register, it's taken to a confirmation page. It tells them the date and the time. And then during that date, they jump on the webinar, and they listen to you live selling something. At the end of it, they buy something. So there's the sales funnel for a webinar. Now, if you're in an automated webinar where you pre-record it, this is what the automated webinar funnel looks like. They register. If they decide to watch the replay right now, they can watch it right now. If they don't, they go to the same confirmation page, and they show up the time of the webinar. They get a webinar email, and then at the end of it, you sell them the product. Now, the cool thing about automated webinars, you can do some really cool email sequencing, where you can say email number one, send out, you can segment people. So anybody who subscribes to the webinar, send them this email sequence. If they show up to the webinar and they stay for the whole thing, send them this email sequence. But if they leave before I pitch the product, send them this email sequence. And if they don't show up, then send them this email sequence. Okay, so this starts getting into some more advanced funnel stuff, like what are the sequences and where do we put people and all that kind of stuff. But I just want to kind of give you guys a hint of how exciting and how big some of these funnel things we're talking about can get. So this is what it would look like for a typical automated webinar funnel. All right, so the perfect webinar script, again, guys, this is something I could go over for hours, but this is kind of what it looks like. Okay, and I'll go through it really, really quickly. Usually there's three parts of a webinar. There's the intro, there's the content, and then there's the pitch, the close. So the intro, again, we start with the bold promise. We give them a hook to the end, something about, if you stay on the end of this webinar, I'm going to give you this cool prize or this bonus or whatever. We command attention. We tell them to put away Skype or Facebook. We try to get their attention. We qualify ourselves on why we're an expert, why they should listen to us. We future pace them about what's going to happen if they consume this webinar and gain from it. Future pace them, right? Then we jump into the content of the webinar. Most people, when they do their webinars, they're trying to teach people 5 or 6 or 7 things. For a webinar to work really, really well, same thing we talked about in all the other scripts, you guys. You got to focus on one thing. What's the one core message that you need to get your audience to believe, to buy what it is you're selling? Okay, and then everything else wraps around that. So for us, we pick one core thing, okay, and usually this one core thing is, we tie it to a headline that says, how to blank without blank. If you can fit that, if you can fit your thing you're selling into that little framework, it works. Okay, for example, one of our recent webinars was high ticket secrets. It was how to sell high ticket products without picking up the phone. How to do what without what. Okay, that's the one thing. And then I go and I share secrets that aren't separate secrets. They're secrets that strengthen the one thing, the one core argument. Okay, and each of these secrets is to break and rebuild their pattern. So if my one thing again is about how to sell high ticket things without selling on a phone, secret number one is probably going to be something. It's a pattern they already have, or it's a belief they have in their mind. Okay, they believe right now that to sell high ticket things they have to be on the phone. Secret number one: here's how I do it without a phone. Okay, I'm going to share them the secret, and I'm going to, in that process, break their belief that they have to have the phone, and I'm going to rebuild it with the truth that I want them to understand and believe. And secret number two is maybe I can do that, but it's going to take a lot of traffic. So secret number two is how to do this with almost no traffic. I got to break their belief and then rebuild their belief patterns to what I need them to believe to buy my thing. And secret number three is the same thing. Okay, so I'm finding out what their belief patterns are that are keeping them from buying my thing. I show them the pattern, I break it, and I rebuild it what I need them to believe. Okay, that's the content section of your webinar. Then from there, we transition. I say, let me ask you a question. I just showed you some cool stuff, but how would you like for me to help you do this? Then we transition to our close. And again, I could spend days on this close. I'm not going to go through it in a whole, but just to kind of give you, a really quick rundown. The first thing we do, the overall close process is what I call a stack. I learned this from a guy named Armin Morn. The stack has literally made me at least $10 million in the last 5 or 6 years. It's how I do every one of my presentations. What it does is basically when I'm sharing my offer, I share, here's component number one, and I talk about it. And then here's component number two. But you notice if I stack them, I share component number three, and I stack them again. Component number four, stack them. So if you ever look at my presentations, you'll notice that in fact it's almost humorous sometimes. Like the first thing you're going to get is this. That means blah, 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 blah. So that means the first thing you're going to get is this, and then here's the second number thing. And I keep retelling this. So by the time I get to the end, you've heard me stack all the components of the offer like 10 times. But what we found is if you don't do it that way, people will only remember the last bonus or the last thing you told them. And so they're justifying the price of what you're selling based on the last thing you told them. And so you want, before you tell them any kind of price, you want them to see the entire offer, everything they're getting in a huge stack. That's why we call it the stack. Okay, and then we pitch it high. We do our if-all statements just like I showed you guys in the last script. We do price high, drop price low, and we have our call to action. Okay. Then throughout this stack, there's a bunch of different closes, and I'm not going to go through these right now, but these are a bunch of different closes we use. I'll drop 1 or 2 or 3. Well, I'll probably drop, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 of these different closes throughout this whole process. And if you Google most of these, you can find them. Some of these are mine. Some of them I learned from other stage presenters. Some I learned from a lot of different people. But if you Google some of these, you'll find out what these closes are. We also have a product at perfectwebinar.com that I go into a lot more detail about this. So that's kind of how we do a webinar pitch. All right, so that's the regular webinar. Now this is an invisible funnel webinar. So the last webinar is a free webinar. Somebody shows up to you, you teach for an hour, 90 minutes, and you sell them something, right? It's a free webinar. That model came from kind of the old world seminar speakers, right? Somebody would go to a hotel room, they get a big audience to come, and they would teach about real estate investing, and they would talk about real estate investing, and at the end of it, boom, they would sell their real estate course. Okay, I'm sure you guys have been to some of those events. If not, they're really fun. But that's where it came from. And it's just replicated. Now we're using that model online through the Perfect Webinar. Okay, now this is called Invisible Funnel Webinar. This is a different type of webinar. The way this funnel works, it's really cool. So somebody comes to the registration page, and you have to kind of sell them. So I have a script that goes with this, but you're selling them on why they should register for your webinar. And the webinar is going to be free. They just put in their credit card. Then after the webinar is over, then you bill their credit card. So they get a chance to come in and test you out for free. See if you're any good. Okay, it kind of comes back to what I talked about earlier with my audience's primary question, right? They're always saying, well, if this is so good, why don't you let me come on and I'll pay you after? So that's kind of what the invisible funnel does. And this is a concept that was initially invented by one of my friends, Dagan Smith. And man, it works awesome. The first time we did this, I can't even tell you how good it was. Basically, someone would come to this page, they watch the video, they put in their credit card, they show up for a webinar, and the webinar ended up being 3 or 4 hours long. And at the end of the webinar, I asked them if they wanted to pay for it. If they did, we billed their credit card. If they didn't, then we didn't. And then at the end of it, we had somebody apply for coaching. We kind of ascended them up. So that's kind of the model for the invisible funnel. All right. So this kind of webinar, again, it's a paid webinar, so it's a little bit different, but it's very effective at moving somebody up the value ladder. Okay. All right. So the invisible funnel scripts. The first one is what is the script we put on this this video right here, and the second is what's the script we use here during this actual webinar. Okay. So the first script I call the magic bullet script. So somebody comes to the page, and there's some things that are similar, right? First thing is I raise questions. Okay. Like, hey, have you ever in fact, we built an invisible funnel in the dating niche. It was kind of a fun one. So like the whole thing was like, have you ever wondered why all the other guys get pretty looking girls and you don't? Blah, 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 blah. Well, I'm going to show you how, so I wrote some questions that were in their head. Then I introduced the magic bullet. Okay. I'm going to show you how you can get a girlfriend this weekend, even if you've never dared talk to a girl ever before in the past. Okay, introduce magic bullet. And I'm going to prove it to you right now. Okay, my name is, and the person we did the dating one for was this guy who's overweight, he's not that attractive, and the big pitch is like, man, I am an ugly, overweight guy, and I still get good-looking girls. So I'm introducing myself, and he says, basically, points out your frustrations. I was just like you. I struggled with the same kind of stuff that you were struggling with until I found my magic bullet. And I found it this way where I can literally get any girl in a day, and it's awesome. So I'm gonna do a webinar that's gonna be awesome. And you're going to be able to come on this webinar. I'm going to show you. Today's Thursday. Come on this webinar. I'm going to show you how to get a girlfriend this weekend. It's going to be awesome. So don't worry. It's not going to cost you anything. And then I do risk reversal. So this is how it's going to work. You come on. You go to the webinar. Go home this weekend afterwards. Spend a whole bunch of time trying to pick up a chick. And if you don't pick up a girl, email me on Monday and I won't bill your credit card. But if you do pick up a girl, don't do anything and I won't charge you anything. Okay, that's how we did it in the dating market. We did this in the speed reading market. We had a partner named Howard Bird. He's the world's fastest reader. So for his, it was the same kind of process. Like if you ever tried to, or if you ever struggle reading books or trying to learn the information you need to, how would you like to be able to read a book a book in an hour? I'm going to prove it to you. My name is Howard Berg. I'm the world's fastest reader. And just like you, I was frustrated. I wanted to learn more. I couldn't do it. And that's when I became the world's fastest reader. And I can literally take anyone in 4 hours, double their reading. And don't worry, I'm not going to charge you for this. I'm going to prove it to you up front. Show up on this webinar. It's going to be 4 hours. We're going to test you at the very beginning of the webinar. We'll test you at the end. And if you've doubled your reading by the end, then you pay me. If not, let me know and I won't bill you a penny. Okay? So that's kind of how we do our magic bullet script. Like, you got to figure out, what's the what's the big promise you can offer somebody? If you can do that, the invisible funnel works really, really good. That's why getting a girlfriend that weekend worked really good. Double your reading works really, really good. Okay, if you can give some kind of big promise, then Magic Bullet script works awesome. Okay, now here's what the script we kind of do when we're on the actual webinar. Okay, so somebody comes on the webinar, and again, typically these webinars are 2 or 3 or 4 hours. Those of you guys who are on this webinar now, you're actually in the middle of an invisible funnel training right now. We are like over 3 hours into this thing, so you can kind of see how it works. Initially, when someone gets on, you retell the hook, and you tell them what they're going to learn, and then you just start teaching. Okay, the best thing about invisible funnel is you're teaching as much stuff as you can. Okay, you're just trying to give as much value as possible. You're not going to sell any. You're not selling anything right now. So I give as much content as I can. I usually tell them what it is, like what's the first piece of content. I try to share some kind of parable or story that illustrates how it works, or how it worked in the real world. Then I teach a concept behind it, and then I show an example. And then I pick my second piece of content, or my second tip or whatever, and I go through that again and again and again. And I just keep doing that till all my content's been taught. Okay, that's kind of my script for teaching content. At the end of the invisible funnel, you recap. Here's everything you just learned. Now you're going to tie it to value. So can you see how this worked? Okay, how much would it be worth for you to be able to get a girlfriend? How much is doubling your reading worth to you? If I just doubled your reading, you read twice as many books. This is how much it's actually worth to you. So you're tying what you just taught them to some kind of value, so they can see that it was worth a lot. And then you can basically come back and say, look, the webinar is now done, and I just need to ask you if it was worth it. Okay, if so, if this was worth the $97 that I'm charging for the webinar, don't do anything and I'll bill you tomorrow. If it wasn't worth it, then just email me and I won't bill you. Okay, so recap what they just learned, tie it to some real tangible value, then ask them if it was worth it. If so, do this. If not, do this. Okay, and that's how the webinar, the training webinar ends. Then I soft close the webinar. I say, look, so thank you guys for being on the webinar. Now, before we go, a lot of people are asking, all the stuff I talked about, if I can help them with it, and I just want to ask you really quick for your permission to kind of tell you about a special offer I have for you. You don't have to be on it. If you want to hang up now, you can, but I want to make you that offer. And most people are like, yeah, sure. And then they come back and say, okay, so, and then you got a couple different offers. Like, do you want to drive them to a website, to an application, to a paid application? This kind of depends on how you want to transition your offer. Okay, sometimes we send them to a website for them to go order. Sometimes we have them apply. Sometimes make them pay to apply. And then basically my 3-step close to this is simple. What, why, how. Okay, they already know who you are, but it's the rest of the who, what, why, how script. So what do I have? I've got a really cool coaching program. If you want to go apply for it, fill out this application. It's free. Why do you need it? Because if you want to get to the next level fast, I'm going to show you how to do it. How to click on this link and go and fill out the application. Okay, so it's pretty simple and pretty easy. All right, so that's the invisible